Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not to Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Resident Alien. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, we have Harry waking up, and he's thinking like, oh, am I in the afterlife? Like, why are you here, and why does heaven look like a crappy cabin. He said something interesting though. He said human heaven, which I'm wondering, does his species have their own equivalency of heaven? But maybe because he saw like, oh, the way it manifests and stuff, like, oh, this could only be human heaven. Would it make you wonder, just because you're on Earth impersonating a human, would you have automatically would you have gone to the human afterlife, or would you go into the alien afterlife? Thinking too much about it, but I just thought that was interesting. But also his leg situation. She's like, oh, Asta's like, I'll get you a prosthetic, but he's got like a tentacle growing out. She's like, what? It's like, me and my people, it's like, we're basically, I think he says specifically, they're descendant of octopuses. So I thought, like, that's interesting. I guess, well, I mean, it makes sense, because we saw that last episode, that the meteorite that landed on their planet is what gave birth to them, and obviously the ones that landed on this planet turned into octopuses, so they share a lot of probably the same physiology and biology to a certain extent. So it's like, eventually it's going to grow back into a leg. I love the whole thing of Asta being like, could you at least like cover that up or something? He was like, no, it likes the fresh air. Your leg, that you're shaming my leg. That's leg shaming. And it's a little creepy when the tentacle grabs the bacon and he eats it. Which was it this or something else that was talking about the fact is octopuses actually don't have legs; they're actually arms. Was it this? There was something else I was watching that brought up octopuses, and we're talking about the fact is, I don't remember what it was. It's going to come back to me later. But regardless, I love the whole thing of Asta messing with his device, and he's like, well, don't do that. Please, just don't press the black button. She's like, oh, this button? She's like, wait. He's like, thank you. He's like, oh, thank you so much. He's like, there. So it's like, I'll see you later. And he's like, in his head, well, there won't be any later. So, but obviously his device ends up being messed up. I thought it was interesting, too, when he brought up that the device if it can be used to power, like, lights, power for like 5,000 years or something like that, which is interesting to think about. Hopefully when it's all said and done, Harry uses it for that purpose instead of like wiping out all of like humans. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see on that front. But the fact is they introduced it like that means like, oh, it can be used for another purpose though. Like the amount of energy used from that weapon to destroy could also be used as a power source. So we'll see if they kind of go down that route with it next episode. I also love that like Max and Sahar stopped by, mainly because Sahar followed Max, which she was like, I'm the one that set this truce in motion. You're just gonna like cut me out of it. And she's like, well, you have under that thing. It's like, the fact is I have it under here means it's hidden. And then Max spoils it by being like, oh no, it's his radio. It's messed up. And so he needs to fix it. And so I thought that was interesting. It's also neat too that he was like, oh wow, he was actually kind of happy that Harry was okay and everything. I also love the fact he's like, yeah, but now Asta knows. It's like, whoa, you told Asta? And it was almost kind of sad because he was almost like, whoa, I thought that was supposed to be our secret. Which I was like, oh, I think Max kind of enjoyed being the only one who knew that you were an alien. I thought that was pretty dope. But also it's like, oh yeah, why don't you just get on your ship to leave? It's like, and Sahar's like, oh, the government must have taken it, which she kind of nailed it. But then she's like, yeah, and who knows what agency it could be? It could be the Men in Black. And it's like, yeah, but it's like, what's the Men in Black? It's like, oh, it's this organization of men and women in suits. You're typically black. It's like, but then why is it called the Men in Black? And she's like, I don't know. It sounds better than people in clothes. She's almost like, oh, you're such an idiot. But obviously for him, he's trying to I thought was a really interesting thing is that he's trying to track down trackers that other aliens have put in humans, because apparently the other aliens have a tendency to put trackers in humans just to kind of come back for them later on at some point in time, and he needs to find one. And obviously with Asta's help, which Asta's dodging questions from Darcy because like obviously she's got to explain why she took off with Harry, and she's lying like, oh, I went to this other hospital for an MRI. Then Ellen comes in and it's like, yeah, that hospital said there's no records of that, and she's like, I'll fix that. And Darcy's like, I got my eyes on, because she's like, I can tell when you're lying. It's like, well, what's my tell? Well, if I tell you what your tell is, then you'll know what your tell is and you'll hide it from me, so I like can't tell you. But that's it, now it's not just Harry in this compromising position, it's also Asta, because now it's like she's got this big secret, not just her dad as well, but it's like, how do you go around avoiding telling essentially her best friend like what's what. So I think that's interesting. But Asta ends up taking him to try and I love they end up at a alien convention, and I love that line of like, it's like, wait, I'm not a costume, and Asta's like, welcome to my world or something. She said something of that vein, which I was like, that's too true. I didn't even think about that at the time. It's like, it's actually kind of interesting when you think about it in retrospect. You're like, man, humans did that, huh? They thought that was, it's interesting to think about. When you look back on it, it's like, that's actually super effed up, especially because it's very stereotypical when you think about the typical costume when dressing up as Native Americans. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. But nevertheless, they're like poking around, and I love that like Harry brings up a lot of stuff about other species and stuff like there was a whole thing about like, oh yeah, like this particular species, they suck. Oh, that species, one of them owes me money. It's like, I think it was like the little green ones. It's like they're cute, but they know it. So it was almost like they use their cuteness to an advantage. And it's like the avians, and he's like, actually, they're pretty nice. Also love the moon landing was fake. It was filmed by Kubrick. Actually, humans didn't land on the moon, and Asta was like, great. It's just that the astronauts didn't come back as themselves, because the moment before they returned, they were taken over as hosts. And Asta's like, wait, what? We're just skipping over that, huh? I just love that whole thing. But it's also interesting too, because there was like one guy that was talking about like, oh man, aliens are the reason why certain things exist on this earth, and Harry's like, thank you. Finally, there's some human out here giving us credit for what we did. So I just thought that was so neat. But obviously what was really interesting is like the main dude at the place, the alien tracker, played by Terry O'Quinn, which I was like, yo! Thing I'm best known for is playing Locke from Lost. I was trying to remember what the most recent thing was, and it was the very sadly short-lived ABC show Emergence. I think that's the most recent thing I saw him in. But I was like, yo! Because I was wondering, like, when we met him, I was like, are you that dude from the beginning? I do think that is fascinating that, like, obviously, like, I wonder, is this his species? Well, he says specifically his species has helped out humans in the past. I don't think he was referring to all aliens. I think he was specifically referencing his species, but we've seen that other species of aliens have come to this planet as well, because eventually it comes out that, like, obviously the alien hunter is the dude from the beginning whose wife, like, obviously the whole ship froze and they were the only ones left unfrozen 30 years ago, and her baby was taken from her. I wonder why both of them were left unfrozen. Like, maybe they wanted witnesses to it or something. I don't know. I don't see the reasoning for that. But the way Harry explains it later on, it wasn't his people that did it. It was the Greys that did it. It makes you wonder, does his species, like, track humans in the same vein? Do they track other species? Like, do they do the same thing? I would assume not. Like, it seems like, specifically, it makes it seem like this is specifically a Greys type of thing, which is kind of interesting, breaking it down. Like, it's so interesting hearing Harry's perspective on other aliens. Like I said, like brought up earlier, like which ones suck and which ones are cool. Which ones kind of fit the more typical, when people think of aliens and abductions. It seems like the way the show is kind of phrasing it, seems like it's specifically the Greys, the species of the Greys species, but we don't know. Maybe there's other species that do the same thing, except for the avians, because apparently they're cool. They're pretty nice. So I mean, who knows? But I also love that, obviously, this lady talks about there being a tracker inside of her arm. So Harry's tracking her down, and she's, doing that whole pretend thing of like, oh, I'm like cutting open an alien. And then like Harry's threatening her with a knife and stuff like that. And she's like, it's a BB in my arm. And he's like, what? You lie? Almost kind of like, oh, you monster. She's like, really? You trying to cut me open with a scalpel? And she knees him in the groins and bounce. Which is so sad because Harry just flattered her so much. Because everyone told these stories about how dangerous aliens are and how scared they are of them. At first, I was almost thinking Harry was going to be like, oh, that didn't happen. Oh, that didn't happen. Oh, you're making it up. Like, I thought, but it's like, once again, each one of them probably had experiences with different aliens. Like I said, maybe specifically the Greys, we don't know. But then Asta got up and she talked about, obviously, what happened. She was like, because we saw this, I think in the first episode when like 4 months ago when Harry's ship crashed. For her, she's like that, in that moment, it made me not feel so alone. It made me feel like, it gave me the strength to leave, obviously, the abusive relationship she was in with Jimmy. And then she's like, I met that alien sometime later, and I don't think, I'm not saying like all of you didn't experience what you did, but maybe they're not all here. Maybe they're all not all bad. Maybe they're all here to do good. And everyone's kind of applauding, and Harry's smiling, and then on the inside of his head, he's like, nope. It kills the momentum because you're like, oh, maybe it's like, oh, she believes you so much, and do you feel any regret about lying to her face? Nope, I'm here for a mission. If it means I gotta eradicate the humans, even though I like some of these humans, I'm gonna eradicate them. It's just like, it's sad that he's still got that mentality. Hopefully things will change, but we'll see. But I love the whole situation of the alien hunter or tracker tracking him down. I also love that Harry spent so much time with that dude, and the dude's talking while he's eating all the fruit. And it's like, oh yeah, I left you these melon things because they say they smell and taste like old women's perfume. But he kind of hit it off with the dude because he was like, oh, I have no problem hiding an alien. Because it turns out the alien tracker can literally see Harry. I was like, now that's interesting. I mean, it's like, once again, it's not like Max is the only one. It's like 1 out of 1,000 people have the genetic thing that allows them to see. So it's just interesting. I mean, it makes you wonder, was that any reason why maybe the power didn't work on him? Like, yes, his wife and the baby were the prize, but maybe it didn't work on him because that genetic anomaly in his DNA, maybe that makes it so that their technology didn't work on. Maybe that's what that's kind of insinuating as well. Once again, could easily be reading too much into it. But it was interesting, though. Like, the guy was like, please don't cut it out, because if you do, because interestingly enough, he has to track her inside of him that Harry needs, but it's like, don't cut it out, because, if you aren't the ones that tell my wife's baby, then maybe, like, they'll come back, which he's like, they got what they want, and he cuts it out, and obviously the alien tracker's like, oh, you're a monster, and he's like, you're welcome. Obviously, he lies to Asta again, but I'm curious. The fact is, what is the point of tracking them if you're not going to come back? Or was he saying that just because it's like, even if they do come back, you're not going to get your baby back? Like, I don't know whether in his own way that was Harry trying to, honestly, in a very effed up way, trying to console him in a sense, to try and ease his pain. Like, you're going to keep spending the rest of your life thinking they're going to come back. They're not. They got what they want from you, your baby, and they bounce. So, who knows? I doubt we're done with the alien tracker, but we'll have to wait and see whether anything becomes of that or not. But what was interesting, though, is like one dude was like, oh yeah, you're the lady that talked about aliens, right? But how are you so sure? She's like, what are you talking about? I mean, who's to say this particular alien isn't a Christopher Columbus? And now, obviously, that's very impactful just because, like, not only on the human level, but from her people perspective of, like, let's not forget what Christopher Columbus did to the Native Americans. So it's like, so that hits on a double-fold lane of, like, now I think it does make her kind of think, like, well, Harry says all this stuff, but, like, how do I know? Like, which is kind of sad because, like, obviously she's kind of been riding the high of, like, oh, man, I actually know an alien, and, oh, Harry's actually kind of a friend and stuff like that. But now it's like, oh, like, now she kind of realizes there might be a different side of this thing. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out next episode. Obviously, some other interesting things. Liv and Mike still on good terms. Mike's dad had to kind of smack some sense into him by being like, yeah, like, because he was like, Mike was like, oh, I bet you she was here, like, saying all this terrible stuff about me. It's like, no, she wasn't. She actually just sat here and listened to me. Something you can learn a little bit about. And obviously his dad was struggling. He was like, come on, Dad, you need help. Like, you should ask for it. He's like, really? You're saying that to me? You should take your own advice. And obviously, thinking back on it, like, he ends up being a little more reflective on it and decides, all right, instead of, like, looking at my board, he ends up looking at Liv's board, which kind of pieces it all together. And he kind of pieces it together and is like, damn, Sam's wife. Obviously, it's like, oh, like, everything kind of pointed towards her anyway. Once again, Not unless there ends up being a twist to that. It seems like it's all done and settled. I think it's meant to be like a background thing, but I don't think it was like the most important thing. I've said that before, but we'll see whether it is as open shut as it is, or whether there's going to be other layers to it. We'll see. But obviously he comes and arrests her. Obviously all the evidence that not really him, but Liv ended up discovering. And I love the whole, what did he say to her? Like, because he was reading her Miranda rights and was saying that, like, oh, she ain't got to worry about money or something. Because obviously you must not have to worry about money because, I think for a lawyer or something like that, because this salon is banging or something like that. But the mayor congratulating him and everything. And obviously it doesn't make him feel great because he knows it wasn't him, it was Liv who kind of figured everything out, and he kind of took her for granted, which I love the whole thing at the end. Liv's up there for karaoke, and then he comes in and he starts singing, and I love Darcy being like, what's going on? Wait, what's happening? And then they're singing to each other, and he's pulling out the badge, and he's getting on one knee and everything, and she's kind of like, yes. And she's like, oh, I'm a deputy gambler's chair, and she's like, yeah. I was about to say, I hope no one's misconstruing this. It's like, no, everybody know what's what. It's like, yay, Liv, she's about to be in a deputy, because everyone most likely likes her more than they do Mike. But, I think that was very humbling of him. And I think going forward, this is definitely going to be interesting to see what their new dynamic is going to be. I even love the mayor bringing up the fact is that he still has to justify all the money and time Mike spent trying to drain the lake. So it's kind of like, yeah, I still have to justify all that to them. But it's like, hey, the case is closed and everything. So there's that side of things. Then there's also the element of Sarah and Richard. You have to put quotes around because we don't know if those are actually even their real names. Might just be the identities they're going with. But I love the whole thing. They're over for dinner, which I love. Ben's like, wait, it's not tacos? It's like, oh, yeah, we're having this. But he's like, yeah, but it's taco night. Like, not unless we push... Well, what was it? They were going to have something else tomorrow night. It's like, not unless tacos get pushed to them. And it's like, obviously, he's very he has his very, like, eat the same thing these particular days type of thing. And she's like, oh, just kind of get out of your comfort zone a little bit. And it's like, oh, Sarah's like, oh, come on, we're friends now. You don't have to call him Richard. Just call him Dick, and just kind of looks at him. And I love during dinner, it's like, oh, yeah, we want to have kids. And I love, like, Richard being like, yeah, but the doctor says Sarah's too old, and she just kind of glares at him. It's like his way to kind of poke back at her after all the poking she does. Because let's not forget, she literally choked him out. Was it last episode, I believe? Yeah, so was nearly threatening to kill him and everything. Plus, did the whole thing of like, oh, just call me Dick. And obviously, like, Kate having to tell Ben, like, yeah. He's like, oh, you want me to talk about my candles and stuff like that? She's like, no. He's like, what, you have a problem with candles? She's like, no, I love them, but just not really lively conversation. He's like, well, if that's true, I don't want to live in a world where that's true. So, while Sarah is doing her thing, investigating, looking through Max's stuff, when she ends up finding the piece of the spaceship, and she lies to Kate's like, just this whole having not kids thing is rough. It's actually not on my side of things. It's actually on Richard's side of things, but he's very self-conscious because he's got low mobility. It's like, of course, just swing that around because it's like, oh yeah, because even older women, she's trying to be like, no, I'm not that old. It's on Richard. Richard's the one that's the problem, not me. It's like, you're not even having kids, but in just metaphorical sense, you don't want to be looked at as like, I'm the issue in the race. No, it's him. So I was like, oh, if just to be close to a kid, oh, you can babysit Max whenever you want to. Oh, really? I'd love that. Take such good care of him. It's like, oh, you're the sociopath that's quick to want to kill everybody. I was like, okay, don't want to see what that looks like when it comes to Max, especially if he doesn't give you the answers you want. But Ben and Richard kind of hit it off a little bit of like, oh yeah, the women in their life. It's like, oh, they can be. Oh yeah, what was it? What was the word? Richard uses a word, and Ben's like, yeah, that's one word, and it's just because for them it's just kind of like the way the women in their lives kind of shut down the things that they do or say. So and Ben actually kind of got a little dark with it, being like, oh yeah, like there was a murder in town. I mean, it's been handled, but still, for him, it's like there hasn't been a murder since the 1800s in Patience, Colorado, and now there is one. He's like, I always wanted to be the guy that said, not on my watch, but this was on my watch. And you're like, oh, you've been actually carrying that the entire time, because for him, it's like, I'm the mayor. I'm in charge of the entire town. Like, yeah, he seems like a little bit of a goofball, but he has his heart in the right place. And for him, it's like, he feels like he failed everyone for like letting something like that happen on his watch. He even said like, I think I was like across the street when that happened, and he was just like, huh. It was like, you let that sink in for a minute. I was like, oh, that's actually sad. That means like that's something you've been carrying around this entire time. You probably haven't talked to anyone about. I mean, to be fair, he would have gone to Sam for therapy about some of that stuff, probably, because we don't know what the Dr. Ethan situation is, because obviously he didn't pop up this episode, so we don't know what the circumstances are on that front of like whether those. I don't know. I don't think they ever talked about whether those sessions still kept going, because Harry took over for them for a little while, but obviously he's not the town doctor anymore. So, but Max does come back home and he sees the recording of seeing Sarah taking it. So now he knows. It's like, crap, they're on to Harry and they know, and how he's going to handle all that. Especially next if Sarah's like, oh hey Max, I'm going to spend some time with you. Like, he knows that she knows about, might not know about Harry. So it's like they're in a truce now, and this is the moment I've been waiting for, because I brought up earlier, like when the alien people come to him about Harry, like what side of things will he be on? Now that they're in a truce, like he'll probably protect Harry, because in a weird way, Harry has become his friend. But if they throw out the whole thing of, oh, he's here to kill us all, maybe that'll change things. Or maybe for him, it's like, nah, Harry's too much of an idiot to kill anyone. It's like, yeah, I thought so too, but now where we are, well, he did threaten to kill you all those times. So that, I don't know. I'm curious to see what Max's perspective on things is going to be when that confrontation eventually happens about like, oh, we're here to save the human race from Harry. So there's that. But another really interesting side of this episode is Darcy. It was interesting because obviously she was being interviewed by Jay, which Jay kind of hit her with the hard questions of like, oh, so like, how'd you feel? You were the hero of town and you fell, because you were the hero and you literally fell. And it's like, I thought this was about the rescue thing. It's like, yeah, it was, but I'm just doing a little background. Darcy's like, cool. And it's like, what happened to your arm? It's like, oh yeah, I broke it falling in a crowd. It's like, wait, you fell in a crowd? It's like, yeah, like, how else did you think this happened? So I guess like word had gotten around a little bit, but at least to Jay at that point in time, she didn't know the ins and outs of the whole rescue operation. And it's like, wait, you crawled out with just one arm? It's like, yeah, because if I didn't, Harry and Asta would have died. And she's like, and me, we would have all died. And Jay was like, wait, what? Asta could have died? It's like, yeah, as well as Harry and me. And it actually hit Jay, because obviously she's been avoiding Asta this entire time. And it's like, wait, like if she died, like regardless of her being pissed at her right now, it's like she still likes Asta, like the relationship they had before. Yeah, it might have been built on lies, but she still got to spend time with Asta, and like knowing that, like, wait, your mom would have died and you would have just, there was so much left unsaid, so I think that's something we could potentially see going forward too, is like them bridging the gap. But I love Darcy's friend getting inside her head, because Darcy's just like, oh, like Harry and Asta, neither one of them was responding to me and stuff like that. It's like, I mean, I got to check in with my friends. And then like Trisha's like, bitch, I'm your friend. It's like, yeah, she's like, I'm closer to you than Asta. And she's looking like, really? And she's like, yeah, we dated the same guy. You mean you cheated with the guy, my boyfriend at the time, behind my back? I was like, yeah, I think she said I touched his dick and he liked it. So, and it was just kind of like, oh, and then like Darcy being like, yeah, that was a sign. But then like Tracy started getting super dark about like, oh, maybe she got kidnapped, thrown in a trunk, pounding and yelling for help, and maybe she's dead right now or something. And it's like, she's like, is that supposed to make me feel better? Which that in turn sets Darcy in a mission, and she shows up at Harry's place. I was wondering if like, oh, she's gonna catch Harry and Asta together, and that's gonna make her like, oh, a little heartbroken when she saw like Harry with Isabel. I thought it was gonna be something similar in that vein. She shows up there and it's like, oh, they're not here yet. I was like, oh, are we gonna do this? And she breaks into the back. I was like, no. I was like, uh-oh. She busts into the freezer and it's like, okay, here we go. And then she closes like, oh, did she not see? I mean, it is buried under food, and she's about to walk away. I was like, wait, what? She lifts up the freezer and finds Harry's dead body. I'm like, hell yes, dude. Things are getting spicy and super interesting on many different fronts. The walls are closing in. Harry's got his weapon. Well, he's in the process of having what he needs to reset it. Obviously, Asta's in a position of thinking, maybe Harry isn't all that, after hearing Home Dude's thing of like, hey, maybe he might be the Christopher Columbus of his species, so maybe he's not here to do all good, which kind of to a certain extent you can make those parallels. Obviously, Max knowing that Sarah knows about the alien, and Sarah knowing Max knows about the alien, trying to get to Harry as quickly as possible. Darcy having found Harry's body and what that means. Granted, Harry could show up later and be like, oh, I'm fine. Darcy? It's Darcy. She drinks a lot. She's kind of losing her damn mind. If that information gets back to Asta, then you're going to be like, okay, then Asta might start questioning things like, wait, I asked him about the real Harry. That could have been the real Harry. I now know, so that could play a role in it. So many ways this could all ultimately end up playing. I'm so curious where everything's going to take us going forward into the season finale. The fact is that I don't know. This could literally go any way. With his plans failing, maybe Asta turns on him and turns him over to the government. Maybe she regrets it. Maybe things turn that way. Maybe it turns out that no one figures out anything about the real Harry. I feel like that secret's going to come out because the moment it does, like, Asta's going to turn on him. And maybe that's, like I said, maybe that's going to be the thing of, like, at first it seems like she's on his side, but then she finds out about the real Harry, and it's like, I can't let you be the end of the world. I got to save the world from you, Harry. So, but like I said, maybe Harry's going to change his mind at the last second. Maybe something with Asta makes him go, I don't want to destroy this planet anymore, and rather uses it as a battery. Is everyone else going to find out about him being an alien, or is it just going to be Asta and Max at the end of the day, and Dan, who know the truth? Oh, dude, it's going to be so interesting to see what goes down in this season finale. I cannot wait to see how this all ends up playing out. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.